All right, hello Honors 100. I hope everyone had a good weekend. So I wanted to kick off today's class just with checking back in about our creative nonfiction assignment. Again, that due date is going to be coming up relatively quickly on us. So we looked at over the prompt last time, and so again, as I mentioned, it's pretty open-ended as an assignment. I welcome you to take some real creative liberties with this. I welcome you to incorporate some more visual elements or more creative use of layout for the benefit of this piece. Again, the prescribed length is in the 5 to 6 page margin. I ask that you try to have a minimum of 3 pages of actual, more conventional writing. If you were just kind of copy and paste whatever format you're thinking of into a Word document or to a Google Doc and use 12-point Times New Roman font and double space it, try to make sure you still have roughly 3 pages or so of content there. I'm not necessarily going to police that too strictly where I go and check it unless it seems pretty clear to me you're way short of that. You only have like 1 page of actual writing. So try to make sure you have met that bar. Though again, also remember if you'd like to include a 1-page process memo where you just kind of discuss what your creative choices were, why you chose to approach the assignment in this way, that is also fair game. So especially if the project is skewing more visual in nature, or just kind of has to be concise given the nature of what you're writing about, doing that process memo as an addition to it is a way of still making sure you earn full credit, and especially if you're doing something where you're not sure I'm going to get it, right? Where it's kind of a more experimental style that, defies kind of academic genres, isn't sort of a short story, isn't sort of anything like an academic essay and presentation. If you want to kind of explain to me what you were thinking, I am game for some really outside the box things, but again, I might need that extra leg to fully understand what you're doing if you're getting really kind of experimental with it. So I'll really look forward to seeing what folks come up with there. For our next class session, what I'm going to ask people to do is try to have a page of this thing written, or in lieu of a page, if you want to have a pretty well-conceived outline of the piece, but having some sort of substantial start on your creative nonfiction piece. What's going to happen for next time is I'm going to assign you partners to work with. So it's not going to be kind of our conventional in-class discussion where you need to weigh in on the discussion board to get credit, but rather I'm going to assign partners to you to connect with, to share what you have so far in your work, and just to kind of talk through what you're thinking. Because I think sometimes with a creative piece like this, if you're feeling a little bit stumped about it, that really helps to get some feedback about what someone else thinks. That might give you some ideas, or to get kind of that validation that someone thinks that this is really cool what you're doing, because I think a lot of times that's what ends up happening with this assignment. So in any event, try to have a good start on this piece, get at least a page or so, and or a well-conceived outline of what you're thinking about for that purpose. And I'll talk more about logistics of that next time. But if we were meeting in person, ordinarily what we do for our next class session would have been to do sort of a peer review exercise and then to give you some time to write in class. So, it's kind of almost an honor system of I'm trusting that you're going to work with each other, with these assigned partners, and then take advantage of the extra time when I'm not asking you to have, read anything extra or participate in an online discussion, to nonetheless use that time to your advantage to actually work on these pieces. So, but with that, I wanted to turn to this Wendy S. Walters piece I asked you to read for this time. So I think it's an interesting piece, and I think it's a compelling example of some of what you can do with this creative nonfiction format. We looked at the Verity Sales piece, we looked at the Ta-Nehisi Coates piece, and now I've looked at this Wendy S. Walters piece. I would say any of those, especially for a more written kind of take on this opposed to visual, although the Verity Sales one did have a visual element to it. But these are all, I think, really different from each other, but all kind of fine examples of the kind of thing that you could do for this assignment. So with the Wendy S. Walters piece, I wanted to zone in just a few different elements of it and ask a few questions. And again, I welcome you to kind of weigh in on other aspects of this that were of interest to you in our discussion thread. But so in this essay, there's this overarching sense of sort of, disorientation, that everything is changing in the wake of Hurricane Sandy. And specifically, what Walters plays a lot with this idea of different meanings of words or how the meaning of words changes over time. There's things like the word ship, right, which kind of think most directly, just means a vessel that travels on water, but invites some other kind of interpretations of this, like to ship as in to send something off, like mailing it or sending it via UPS. And I think that there are other ones as well in terms of if we think about when we talk about shipping, for people who are kind of into like pop culture and in the fan fiction kind of game, things along those lines, this idea of shipping different characters, right? Imagining they were in a relationship with each other. We can play with all of these different connotations a word might have, which can be really different, right? There's the word skyscraper, which talks about, which I think to me is one of the more interesting moments of the essay, where she talks about how originally it was that top sail in a ship and how it scraped the sky, and how that was sort of appropriated to talk about land and talk about just the tallest buildings that we have, and how in some ways that's a really similar definition for how high something reaches, but also a really different one for being something static and kind of fixed in the world, as opposed to something that's kind of meant to be at sea and kind of sailing. Um, there's a lot of discussion around the meaning of water, right? And at one point on page 181 to 182, she talks about being the message or being the messenger. And I'm curious of what people make of that, because I have my own interpretations, but I think that's definitely a moment that's sort of open for the reader to kind of make of it what they will. There's this discussion of the Statue of Liberty, right? Which is another one of my favorite parts of this essay on page 187, where this idea of that it's gazing outward, which I think traditionally, we think about the Statue of Liberty, not the one on the Las Vegas Strip, but the one in New York. We think of it as being sort of a symbol of hope that sort of is greeting immigrants when they come in. But the way Walters paints it is looking out to the sea as if it's looking for help somewhere else, because there's no help to be found right there in New York or in the United States, so it needs to look elsewhere, which I think is a really clever, interesting inversion of what that symbol might mean. And I'm curious, what people think of that. But there's also this idea of, the crest and the trough of a wave, and kind of this idea of fluidity and how one flows into the other, and the same water can be, different things from moment to moment. There's this idea on page 193 of New York itself being a concept of a place rather than being a fixed place, and the way that can change and what its meaning and identity can sort of change. There's this idea about landfills on page 188 about, we think of landfills as being a place where garbage goes, right? But in the discussion on 188, it being sort of a place of treasure that almost has been thrown away, right? Kind of the basis of the discovery is found there. So all of this stuff about the changing kind of meaning of words and meaning of concepts and identity, I think really speaks to kind of, again, the sense of sort of chaos and sort of inevitable change that happens, especially in the wake of a major event like a storm, right? And I think that there are ways sort of indirectly that we could apply a lot of this to our current situation, where most of us are, exercising a high degree of, social distancing and isolation, and kind of how we when we emerge from this, I imagine a lot of things are going to go back to the way that they were. But after you live through something like this, I feel like that there also has to be some degree of change, right? Because now this is a possibility. If you asked us all, a year ago, did you think that, school will go completely online, and, for some of you, you'll be moving back in with your parents, or if you're in your own apartment or whatnot, you just would have to stay inside most of the time to avoid interaction with people. It seems kind of nuts, right? I think, whereas now it just sort of is the way the world is, right? And so how quickly something like that can change, and how that can affect our worldview moving forward. But in any event, the other thing I wanted to mention here is that the way that this thing is constructed, the way Walters writes this, there's ways in which it's similar to the Coates piece and to the Sales piece, where it's not entirely linear, right? There's a different version of this essay that could have been written, that I imagine could be much more literal and just kind of chronologically capturing what happened with Hurricane Sandy and the effect on people. That's not at all what Walters is doing here, though, right? She's using kind of this experience with the hurricane as kind of a basis to explore sort of American ideas identity and to go, at times, relatively personal, and in a lot of cases, more broadly thinking about kind of American identity, or at least New Yorker kind of identity, in ways that I think are sort of interesting, and in ways that I think it's an interesting choice of format, and I am curious to hear kind of what the class makes of this format, what that does, if that makes it sort of more accessible in some ways, or more interesting in some ways, or more problematic to you in other ways, kind of your reactions to that. And kind of in general, what we make of this sense of sort of, major world events, kind of, disaster sort of events, and their impact on kind of a communal experience. I think it's oversimplifying things to say, when people sort of blanketly say we're all in this together in our current situation, or, in any instance of, terrorism or massive weather events or shootings or anything like that, because we all do process the world in really different ways, right? Even being a relatively homogenous group of people who are, college students who are relatively early in your college careers, still, I imagine your home life looks really different from person to person right now. And so the degree to which this sort of thing kind of unifies us, and also the degree to which it might underscore differences, I think all of that is sort of interesting to discuss in a piece like this. So I'll be really interested to hear what all of you think of this piece and reactions to it. And again, I encourage you to, if you're struggling with this creative nonfiction piece, first of all, please feel free to reach out to me. We can definitely discuss ideas, but more so looking back at these pieces. There's other pieces we've read throughout the semester that you could argue also fall under this creative nonfiction category, but specifically these last few we've accessed as a class, the Coates, the Sales, the Walters. I think you can definitely look at all of those and kind of pull different things from them by way of kind of inspiration or kind of illustration of the different sorts of things that you might be able to do. Okay, so thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you next time.